granted.
Forgive me if it sounds like I'm gushing, but I truly cannot believe that Fort Solis is an indie game. Maybe this is a testament to the mostly untapped power of Unreal Engine 5 thus far, but as you can clearly see in front of you, all else aside, visually, this is not just the single best looking indie game I've ever seen, but one of the best looking games I've ever seen, period. Maybe some would argue this shouldn't be a key point, and I get it, but my counter is that for the type of game Fort Solis ultimately is, a highly cinematic sci-fi horror walking simulator feeling like the hypothetical love child of Firewatch and Observation, its visuals do it a tremendous service. In fact, its entire presentation really does. Truly everything here, from the art design, lighting, atmosphere, weather effects, sound effects, music, and voice acting, are overwhelmingly phenomenal, and a state-of-the-art example of how to make a game as deeply immersive as it can be. It's a bummer it includes no native ultra-wide support, but thankfully has a number of graphics options including DLSS, and the ability to turn off my 3 least favorite graphical effects: film grain, motion blur, and chromatic aberration. I'll also argue, however, that Fort Solis' stellar presentation does a hell of a lot of heavy lifting. This is going to be a very divisive game that a lot of people will adore, a lot of people will absolutely hate, and many in between may struggle to even finish. But before I go into the details, I'll briefly mention that if you'd like to help support us in giving indie developers a voice, we'd love if you would check out our Patreon in the link below and consider becoming a member, where you can get cool perks like access to our I Dream of Indie Games Discord community. Now back to Fort Solis. The game takes place on Mars in the year 2080, where our protagonist, Jack, responds early on to an alarm call from a mining base where the crew have seemingly vanished. Fort Solis establishes its cinematic atmosphere right off the bat, with a lengthy opening credit sequence covering Jack's journey to his mysterious destination as he makes his way there in an autopiloted dune buggy of sorts. There is something you're all going to notice early on when you play Fort Solis, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There is no run button, and before long, you're really going to want a run button. For much of at least the game's first half, I was ready to defend this decision. This is a walking sim through and through, where you guide Jack through the halls of the titular base, exploring the abandoned common areas and picking up audio diaries, video logs, and various notes that grant context to the situation you find yourself in. But there are times later on when shit hits the fan in ways I won't spoil here, and yet aside from a few scripted running sequences, you never really manage to find the gas pedal, even when the stakes are high. It's a little disorienting when you're controlling a character that shouts, "Fuck this! Fuck staying calm," only to have them continue to casually stroll about at a pace that could be lapped by an elderly power walker. That said, while the walking is sluggish, I honestly believe, at least for the first half of the game, that granting the ability to have you run all over the place definitely would have hurt the overall tone. While Jack wanders the base, he'll always have the voice of his crewmate, Jess, in his ear, commenting on his actions and giving him a teasing poke here and there. While the writing has the occasional fumble, it's mostly very good, and the stellar performances add a sense of believability that kept me invested. While the playful banter helps develop these characters to some degree, I do feel that the game's hesitation to delve much into their past kind of limited the story's impact. I liked Jack and I liked Jess, but we never learn much about who they are and what led them here, with the mystery behind Fort Solis' alarm taking not just a primary role in the plot, but an exclusive one. And overwhelmingly, the plot is totally fine. It does a great job of building intrigue and peeling back the bits of its central mystery layer by layer, but even at a total of 4 hours long, the game feels heavily padded at times, even by walking sim standards. As Jack explores the base, there are some cute little distractions like exercise equipment or toys on people's desks that can be used, and I actually kind of enjoyed these. They sort of help the game feel grounded and give credence to the idea that you're exploring an area that shouldn't be so abandoned. Then, on the flip side, you have moments like the section of the game where you have to slowly walk to 5 different specifically numbered terminals and play a boring QuickTime event at each one before moving on. Sequences like this add nothing but busy work to the story, and no amount of self-deprecation by the devs, like when your character says, "I haven't got the time for this," while walking to these terminals, makes it better. Yeah, I'd agree, we don't have the time for it either, so why couldn't we just move on? I will say in the game's defense, While walking around, everything interactable is highlighted, so you at least usually know where you're going, aside from some times where you'll need to use the game's map, which can be quite small and difficult to read, unfortunately. Anyway, I'm sure some of you shudder at the mention of a boring QuickTime event, so I might as well tackle that too and let you know that Fort Solis is absolutely filled to the brim with these. Personally, and I know to some this is heresy, I kind of enjoy QuickTime events when they add to the immersion. While many games do them poorly, the way they were handled in titles like God of War, Heavy Rain, or Detroit Become Human were always great and added a little bit of interactivity to scenes that would otherwise have had none. This is clearly the intention in Fort Solis as well, but most of these fall pretty flat. The button prompts rarely make you feel like you're truly involved in whatever is being done, and the timing window for some can be really short. It didn't get to the point where I found them annoying, but I'm pretty sure some people will. And the lack of any accessibility options allowing you to make these sequences easier or remove them altogether is sure to sting a bit for some. While the early game's pace does pick up a bit and the overall reveal is pretty interesting, I did feel the game's missteps become more numerous as it went on. In ways that I won't share for the sake of spoilers, the plot leans pretty heavily into horror tropes at times, and there are certain to be several occasions where you yell at the screen from some boneheaded, walk right into the dark scary place without any sort of weapon kind of decision making. But as much as the cliches build up, and they really truly do at times, the ending was moderately satisfying, even if it left a few too many things open to interpretation. If it's not clear already, Fort Solis is not a game for everybody. Not only will its slow build up be a turnoff for many, but I will warn that its main draw, the stunning presentation, is going to heavily depend on your setup. I only tried the PC version and have no idea how the PS5 one is set to run, but I will say that on max settings at 4K on a PC running an RTX 4080, I needed DLSS to even manage to hit 60 FPS, as without it I was more in the 30 to 40 FPS range. I have no doubt that much lesser hardware will be able to run it by compromising on resolution and settings, but if you don't have access to any of the modern AI upscaling solutions, just know this is a really demanding game, and you'll want to make sure you're set up to run it properly. And if you're trying to play it on the Steam Deck, I'm sorry to report that the game doesn't boot up at all on it, neither natively nor when run through Proton. I can't comment on if the developers will get the game running on Steam Deck at 30 FPS and low settings at least, but for now it's completely unplayable and you'll have to keep track of if that changes. Ultimately, I enjoyed my time exploring Fort Solis and felt naturally motivated to explore as completely as I could despite the stagnant pacing at times. But your mileage is really going to vary by how much game you require in your games, and how patient you're willing to be when your character's only speed is a leisurely stroll that's surely designed to pad things out a bit. As flawed as it is, the performances, writing, and sublime visuals make this a journey worth taking, if you have the hardware to run it and the patience to see it through. But if anything I said made you hesitate, you might want to wait for a sale. As always, I really appreciate you all watching. Please, if you like what you see, take the time to like and subscribe, it really helps us out, and feel free to check us out on patreon.com/idreamofindiegames to continue supporting independent game reviews that give a voice to the voiceless.
Anything?
No. Weird. To trigger the alarm and not respond?
It's a stone's throw from here. Why don't you check it out?
People who use that expression don't normally apply that logic to Mars.
That vacation can't come soon enough.